There is nothing more powerful than to have somebody say that they're speaking for God. That is a great way to create an incredible power and control over your situation. I'm One of the things I hate is I hate how Safari can act like it will brush away something just because if something is. Here we go. Okay, I'm supposed to. So I'm so glad that you're joining me. We're going to talk about religion and narcissism today. Talk about the power of some to use God, spirituality, religion, the church as a way to control us and as a way to shut down conversation. And one of the things I want to also get into is a little known concept. It's actually a form of toxic positivity called spiritual bypassing. I don't know if you've heard of spiritual bypassing, but I'd like to talk about that because that's another really great way to invalidate and minimize people is through this form. So I'm so thrilled that you're here, that we're live streaming together, and we're going to be talking about the church, talk about religion and narcissism, and what happens in these toxic situations when people end up being abused by organizations, by institutions, by groups, but how people can also end up being controlled and even become part of a cult. Years ago, I was around. I was alive when the Jim Jones scenario happened in Guyana. In fact, the pastor of my church had gone to college with Jim Jones. He knew him. He knew him personally, and I just remember the reaction of my pastor when this happened. When that's where we get the saying "drink the Kool-Aid" is because Jim Jones led a whole group of people when he was feeling threatened to imbibe in this ritual as a way to sort of prove their devotion and control, or devotion and their love and their compliance to him. And they ended up a whole group, which is women, children, and men ended up dying in this horrible tragedy. So religion can be done, some really horrific things can be done in the name of God. It can be done by powerful people. One of the things that I know that we don't talk a lot about, and I'd love to talk more about, is how narcissists are attracted to institutions of power. So anytime that you have something happening that's really big and exciting and there's a lot of activity around it, there's a lot of attention to it, there's a really great risk you're going to see narcissistic individuals move in and attempt to take over because they're very, very attracted to power, systems of power. And what more powerful than to say that you speak for God? I mean, there's and how do you combat that? Actually, what do you say when someone says, God says, or are you questioning whether or not my interpretation of whatever the religious text is that they're talking about? It's a great way to isolate people, to minimize people, to invalidate. It can become a very toxic structure. And we've seen that happen in several very large church situations in the recent past. I don't know how many of you are aware of Ravi Zachariah, he sort of was a Billy Graham figure. He went around to college campuses and talked about the virtues of being a Christian and walking in the way of Christ. But meanwhile, he was abusing women internationally. He had set up a massage parlor chain internationally. And sadly, these women had complained to the church. They had gone and reported it, and that no one believed them until they finally found an atheist, a journalist who was an atheist, to begin to do this discovery and found out that this huge, horrible, abusive ring had been set up where women had been being abused for years. And it's so we have these types of sad examples where people who are seemingly good people, have this incredible persona, and what happens around that is that they take advantage of this power and the leverage that it gives them, the access that it gives them, and they do these really, really horrific things. So I'd like to hear what your experience has been with narcissism in the church, or narcissism in some religious groups, or maybe you've been a part of a cult and you experienced the abuse in leadership. I'd love to talk about that with you. And we can get into these issues and talk about what do you do when there is toxic people who are being predatory and exploitive in these very toxic situations. So has anyone had that kind of experience in the past? Have you been in a situation where you have been in where something like this happened? Years ago, I was in a church, and I know the pastor meant well. I really believe he had a good heart, but we had a youth leader who was very dynamic. I don't actually know what was going on at home. He was very private. We saw his wife at all the events, and his son was a year younger than me, maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me, and he ended up leaving his wife. I think I was like 16 at the time, and he married one of the 17-year-olds in our youth group leader in our youth group. I mean, to me, I was horrified. And here's somebody I thought was supposedly safe. I've been having all this type of interaction with this individual and exposure with this individual. I had no idea that he would have even viewed any of us from that light. I mean, this guy was in his, let's see, if he had, his son was, like I said, a year younger than me, so that, say, 15-year-old, and if he had his son, say, in his early 20s, he would have been mid-30s, late 30s. I mean, and here's the kicker. The part that really was shocking is the pastor actually agreed to marry them. I'm not even for sure why that would have happened or how that would have seen anything remotely acceptable. I remember going to the wedding, actually. She looked really pretty. I felt kind of sad, and it was surreal. The whole thing just felt very surreal. But we can get in these situations where seemingly unusual things become normalized, and when there is a group dynamic that says that it's okay, the power of the group then ends up working to then legitimize abnormal behavior. And that's the scary part of all of this. And then when they couch it in defending their position with religious terms, I mean, think of slavery, how they defended slavery biblically for many, many years. When they then defend whatever the atrocious behavior, it becomes very hard to combat that because the whole system then is working to keep it the same way. It's interesting. I grew up in a very conservative home, very conservative religious home, but I ended up, when I got married and moved back to my home state, I ended up getting involved with a church in an area of churches that were even more conservative than the church that I grew up in, where they wouldn't allow women in leadership. And I always thought that was really strange too. Like, what was inherently flawed about women that they weren't allowed to have elderships, they weren't allowed to teach men, to have authority over men. And I'm thinking, here you're having this differing view of opinion, and even this could be very collaborative, that could bring a whole lot to the plate, but then they were using the texts in the New Testament as a way to exclude women from positions of power. And again, I'm not even sure, if you were to go back to those original texts of Paul, I'm not for sure that was Paul's intent. I think Paul might have been speaking to the times, not speaking about gender roles all and forever. But it's interesting how we can have these power structures get set up, and then they perpetuate themselves, and it becomes very, very hard to combat that. The other thing that happened for me, and I wondered how many of it happens for you who are listening today, is that your religious beliefs then got used against you and convinced you to stay longer in the toxic relationship. I know for me that I heard often that a submissive wife, an obedient wife, was a picture of faith, and actually helped redeem her husband, had the ability to influence him and make him a better man, and to leave him was to possibly harm him spiritually, and that it was our Christian duty, our wifely duty, to stay in these relationships as a service to him and as a service to God. And here I am in that toxic relationship that I describe in Love You More, my book, Love You More. I tell you what happens, and I know many of you, I don't really talk about religion a lot in the book, but it played a huge role for me, because I really viewed that I had made the commitment to marriage, not just to my partner, but I had made the commitment to God. And for me to leave just because my partner was cheating wasn't actually, for me, it still felt like a breach of a vow that I had made. And so for me, I stayed so long in that relationship because I kept believing that God was on my side, and that God and I together could save this person, and that maybe we could somehow turn situation around and the things would work out better. In fact, at the time, I'd never even heard of the word hoovering. I had no idea that that was a common problem, that So when he came back into the relationship, I'll never forget the first church service I went to. I had a certain song, a religious song I loved to play over and over and over, and they played it that day at church. And I remember hugging him and sobbing, thinking, God answered prayer. He's back. I'm back together with him. We're going to have another try. Maybe things are going to work out this time. And just feeling like a lot of things aligned. Little did I know that, as all of you who've been hoovered and gone through it know, that it was actually a setup for a worse abuse than I experienced the first time through. That this person was going to disrespect me, feel contempt for me. Everything he was doing before, he now feels like he has permission to do, and is going to only do it worse the second time through as a result of that. So it ended up for me putting me into a terribly vulnerable position, because I viewed it from the lens of, I really wanted to be a good person, a good religious person, and as a result, I ended up being abused abused because of that. So I can tell this topic is not very popular. Usually my audience is a lot bigger, and I've lost my audience. But you know, this is still good to talk about, because maybe some of you who are in my audience, it has happened to you. And so I'm going to go ahead early. I normally don't this fast turn it over and talk about questions where you're at, but we can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. We can talk more about how religion gets used against people, but we can also talk about anything else you're interested in. Oh, but I did want to get into spiritual bypassing. How many of you have heard of spiritual? Hey, Brenda, so good to see you. How many of you have heard no, I was saying Brenda's name, have heard of spiritual bypassing? It's a form of toxic positivity. So what that is what they do is, it's when somebody quotes a verse to you, a scripture verse or a religious text or a religious belief, when you're expressing something that's very painful. Like, say for example, you come in and you're saying you've got an upcoming, maybe you're having an upcoming medical examination, and you're really nervous about it because you're afraid that something might be found. Maybe they found something and then they're doing a biopsy, and so so this person, though, instead of sitting with you and listening and validating that your fears are legitimate and that would be a scary situation for anybody in your position, they tell you a text, or they tell you sort of this something to sort of frame it differently. And essentially what it does is you feel stupid for bringing it up. Like a verse that, off the top of my head, that you could say, well, remember, God reminds us we're to cast all our cares on him because he cares for you. Yeah, exactly. Just give it to God. And what happens to you when you hear that is that you feel shut down. It immediately minimizes you, and you feel kind of like silly for bringing it up. You feel invalidated for the fact that hey, Kate, so good to see you. Invalidated for the fact that you mentioned it, that you're now, it's as if they're saying that you're being faithless for having a feeling. So anytime that somebody tells you that you're not allowed a feeling, or you're expressing a lack of faith or not enough belief, or maybe your relationship with God or whatever religious entity you believe in isn't strong enough because you had this thought or feeling or fear, that's a good tip off to you that you're experiencing what's called spiritual bypassing. Like I said, it's a form of toxic positivity. It's a way of us minimizing other people, but doing it in a very great way. I mean, a positive way that makes us feel like they've put a spin on it and they put a pretty bow on it. But it's the same thing as somebody else who just says, why are you, I don't know, you shouldn't be feeling that way. There's no reason to feel that way. Essentially, that's what they're saying to you. There's no reason to feel that way. But exactly, I agree with you. God gave us all of our emotions. And if those who are Christians, you can find examples of Jesus experiencing most of the emotions in the Bible. I mean, he experienced fear. We have experienced anger. He experienced loneliness. He was tired. There's all sorts of things that there's evidence that Jesus felt. And I have a feeling that a lot of other great spiritual leaders, you can find evidence of them also being vulnerable, having a variety of feelings. So watch out for spiritual bypassing. If it feels like something too simple and you feel shut down, then you know that you've experienced a form of spiritual bypassing. Actually, Crescent, that's actually not the verse. She quoted a verse that's commonly misrepresented, and it's actually not dealing with tragedy and suffering. God does not give us more than we can bear. That actually has to do with temptation. If you go look that verse up, it talks about God promises never to tempt us more than we can bear. It has nothing to do with suffering and all the tragedies in life. I actually looked it up because I was saying it to somebody, and I felt checked in my spirit, and I went and looked it up and found out that I was wrong. that it had nothing to do with bad things or suffering or pain or loss. It has to do with temptation, that God won't tempt us. Brenda says, my Catholic ex would tell me that I didn't practice my faith, and he left the church as he left the church after he met his girlfriend. Ooh, man. So he made the conclusion for you that you were faithless, and that's why your partner left the church and left you for another person. Wow, what a painful thing to make that leap. So then in Latino culture, they teach us that we stay through ups and downs, not telling us that ups and downs don't mean abuse. Yeah, I have wondered about that. I know that different cultures view things very differently, and that even the cultural pressure can put pressure on us for staying. I know for me that I grew up in a culture of stoicism, that we were supposed to be, if we experienced pain and talked about it, it was a sign of weakness. So I didn't. And as a result, it kind of encouraged me to be hyper independent and to sort of block my feelings out. So yeah, that's a real danger, that we can end up feeling like there's no permission to leave. Or there's also cultures where does a person go when they leave, especially women when they leave? Who's going to help if they don't have any means of supporting themselves? Where do they go? That may mean they end up in a very difficult situation. Holly says, Dr. Clark has a book about abuse and points out biblically that God doesn't want us to stay in that. Yeah, I know. Are you familiar with Natalie Hoffman's platform? It's called Flying Free Sisterhood. She's quite large on Instagram. I don't think she's on TikTok, though. She talks a lot about that how she believes that abuse is a biblical ground for us to leave as well. So ASD and MPD are two different diagnoses. ASD stands for autism spectrum disorder. You may be referencing ASPD, which stands for antisocial personality disorder. I know they look a lot alike, and they're just missing one initial, and that sometimes we can accidentally mean one will mean the other. He has ADHD, but he's a mess, and we're on the road to divorce now finally, and I feel relieved. Yeah, I'm glad Be Captured Photography that you feel really relieved that you're getting out and that things are going to get better, and that maybe you have more control over your life. I know those people who don't take responsibility for their ADHD, that sort of just kind of use it as as a catch-all kind of excuse. They can create a lot of chaos. There's a lot of just like late with bills and not coming on time and not showing up for work and not following through with tasks. It just can make things really, really tough, that we end up feeling like we're picking up the pieces behind them all the time. So I'm glad you're feeling like you're having some relief. So Brenda was saying her biggest fights occurred to and from church, and he would use that time to attack you. Oh, that's so sad. I bet that made you really hate going to church then, for a lot. So TFF said, God gave us emotions, not just good ones, that Jesus wept. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of biblical examples for Jesus feeling a lot of different emotions. You can find him being enraged. You can find him being afraid. I mean, sweat tears to the point of blood. He was sweating blood. So, yeah, I'm trying to think of what was, Kate, I'm trying to find what you're referencing there. Asperger's means self. It also is like a narcissist. I don't understand what you're saying either, Dorothy. I'm not following that. It doesn't make sense to me. So Maria, so good to see you. You had a gorgeous service at Easter. I think that's lovely. I love the fact that you had a fantastic Easter. A person being abused is not something God would want I agree. It's not something, I don't think that's a godly experience at all. And Asperger's is an outdated expression. It's now we just talk about it being on a spectrum. That autism is on a spectrum as a result of that. So, yeah. So how can you tell if someone is just a porn addict or a narcissistic porn addict? So I would, let's drop the porn addict part off for a second, because narcissists often have addictions to lots of things. So it could be to, substances or gambling, or it can be to video games. It doesn't have to be necessarily to pornography. But I think the way to tell that if it's somebody who is MPD versus somebody who's just an addict is to look at what their personality was like before they became addicted to whatever it was. Were they having problems with work relationship, maintaining a job? Were they having problems maintaining a relationship? So look at the history. Was this person arrogant, entitled? Were they abusive to people around them before the addiction started? One of the things that often happens with MPD is that it's a disorder that you feel adrift and empty inside and kind of lost and sometimes very miserable. And so a great way to fill that, to address that, is through addictions. And that's why they're very prone to addictive behavior, is because it's a way to solve this pain that they feel inside. Because they're excessively restless. Have you noticed that? How bored they get and how restless they get? So a way to fill that is to be preoccupied with something. And so I would ask, what's their history look like? Look at the longevity of this person's life. Can you see that there is a history of them having problems prior to whatever it is that they're indulging in? How do you know if you're a narcissist? Well, there is 9 criteria in the DSM-5, and if you have 5 of them, then you know that you're a narcissist. You generally need to be diagnosed. Now, there's a problem with this, is that it's hard to get a diagnosis of it because that diagnosis doesn't result in reimbursement from insurances. It's not a reimbursable disorder. So you can't go into a mental health practitioner and say, I want to be treated for narcissism. They would have to treat you for something that narcissism is causing in your life, like an addiction. They would treat the addiction. Or you might be, maybe another issue you're having in your life as a result of this disorder is that you're feeling really depressed or really anxious. And they could treat that as well. That they then can focus on it. But as a result, it isn't that MPD is rare. It's not rare. It is NPD is rarely diagnosed. That's why. That's a great question, Gray Rock is cooking. Why don't they cover it? They don't cover it because they don't consider it to be a critical crisis, which is, I know, it's like, really, it is. It's a crisis to everyone around them. So it's ironic that it's not covered as a result of that. By the way, do you guys mind liking this page? I'm really low in my likes, which is one reason why the numbers are so low in the audience, is because nobody is hitting that screen and liking the screen. So I appreciate that. I do have a free survey that you can take. It's in the link in my bio called Am I the Narcissist? And that will give you a sense of whether or not you are a narcissistic or not. But it is a great question. It's considered what's called an axis 2 diagnosis. So axis 1, there's 5 axes. I don't know if they use these anymore. They used to use these back in the day when I was practicing. But the DSM-5, I'm not for sure they still do this. But whenever I saw somebody in the office, I would consider them across these 5 arenas, these 5 areas. The first is, do they have a mental health condition? That's things like a depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Maybe they're having an adjustment disorder. Maybe they're having a psychotic break. You look for something that's a condition, something that makes you feel miserable. And axis 2, then you ask yourself, do they have a personality traits or disorder? And then that's when you would look at things like a dependent personality disorder, or histrionic, or narcissistic, or borderline, or something along those lines. And then axis 3 is, do they have a physical condition that's impacting their mental health, that somehow is, like, say, for example, maybe they recently had Lyme disease and they can't get out of the home and they feel really, really exhausted. And so not being able to go do the things that they normally do is making them feel worse. And then you'd put that down on axis 3. Axis 4 is your psychosocial support system. So you'd ask this person, how well connected? Do they have a good work environment? Or do they have a supportive partner? Do they have resources and friendships? And then you'd rate that in their life. And then finally, you'd look at how overall functioning, what's their functioning level? How well are they doing how well are they doing in their day-to-day life? And then based on that, you would give them a score. So, but insurance pays for conditions. It pays for things that we're suffering from, not states of being. And axis 2, personality disorders, are more states of being. It's how you relate to yourself and to the world and other people. And so as a result, it's a kind of a permanent, it's a way in which you relate to the world. And as a result, it's not seen as a imminent disorder, a crisis, and as a result, then they don't reimburse for it. They will reimburse for it if it causes you problems. It causes axis 1 problems. Like I said, if it makes you depressed, or you find yourself you can't sleep, or you're feeling really anxious, it'll pay for that. But it won't pay. And the saying, I don't know if you knew this either, that insurance doesn't pay for marital therapy either. Doesn't pay for couple counseling. So there are things that that insurances just don't see as critical, and then they don't cover them. Now, the sad part is we all know that if those things were covered and that person did improve, that maybe the axis 1 things, things going wrong in their life would get better and everything would go better. But that's not how insurance sees it. They don't see it that way. So what would happen when somebody come into my office as a result, I typically wouldn't give them an axis 2 diagnosis. Why? What's the benefit of it? All you do is you're labeling this person to go on a record that becomes part of a permanent record of their life that then follows them. And what if I got it wrong? I mean, I didn't usually think that I got it wrong, but I may not agree with somebody else who saw them. So as a result, it just ends up being something you don't always diagnose. Yes, you can have multiple addictions. You can also have multiple personality disorders. That's possible. It's called mixed personality disorder when you have more than one. So that's very, very possible. You can have somebody who has, say, for example, they have some antisocial personality traits and they also have narcissistic traits. You give them a mixed personality disorder, at least in that. I'm speaking of the DSM-4, maybe the DSM-5. They may have changed some names. They always adjust a few things from one edition to another, and they come out. Those new editions come out roughly every 15 years or something. But what was new that you didn't know about before? Gray Rock is cooking. Apple, you said I'm a little confused. How is narcissism a big problem? Well, if you consider the 9 criteria, and I don't know if I can do all 9 off the top of my head, but let's try. So the 9 criteria are this is a person who sees himself as arrogant and superior, different than other people? Do they behave entitled, like they're special and they should have special treatment? Is this a person who they are exploitive? Are they taking advantage of people in their relationships? Is their personality based in jealousy? Are they the person that walks around and feels life's unfair? Is this somebody who is having difficulty in relationships? So when you start to look at all those things, living with somebody who thinks they also have problems with intimacy and they have low reflective ability. So in other words, they're not very intuitive. They don't really pay attention to how they impact themselves or think about other people. And they also don't have a lot of empathy. And the result, they end up being, they are not sensitive how they affect you. They're kind of unaware of how they affect you. So when you think of those things, Apple user, how lovely or likely would you like to be in a relationship with somebody like that? Can you imagine having a partner where you're trying to raise kids and this person's not self-reflective, which means they don't learn and they don't change a whole lot. They don't have a whole lot of empathy. So when you're tired and had a big day and it's been very overwhelming for you, maybe the kids have been sick and you're just exhausted, they're not going to be sympathetic because in their mind they've worked. So what's the problem? You worked, they worked. To them it's the same thing. So why are you upset? They end up feeling like they're entitled to have a good evening because God forbid they showed up, they worked. So then why would you want time off? Why should they have to take over for you that evening just because you were sick kids all day? You think about that. And they probably are likely, because they're not very sensitive and they're not very intimate, they'll probably put you down and make you feel stupid for feeling those feelings, because how dare you compete with them? And by the way, they're jealous. So the fact that you think you deserve time off and they don't deserve time off after they worked day and you worked a day, then then that's just, life's not fair. And they don't want that. That's not how they want to work things out. So that's what it's like to live with somebody who's a narcissist. It's terrible. So yeah, it's not easy to live with somebody who has that mindset about things. Yeah, Christina says, just hearing this makes me really angry. Yeah, it is frustrating, very frustrating. What's the difference between a narcissist and a sociopath? So a sociopath is part of ASPD, which is antisocial personality disorder. So antisocial personality disorder doesn't differentiate between psychopathy, that's how I guess you say it, psychopathy, and sociopathy. I can't say those words very well, so I may be really ruining them. But The difference is if you look at Robert Hare's work, if you go find Dr. Robert Hare, H-A-R-E, that's how you spell his last name, Dr. Robert Hare. He writes a lot about this. He's the one I would say is probably the biggest expert in this arena. Another really good person to check out is, oh, hi, Chris, so good to see you. Another person to check out is, look for George Simon's work. Yep, thank you, Kate, for writing that there. Yeah, exactly. So what I understand from what they say, and this is how I differentiate them, and I have met both types. A sociopath tends to be more made. They tend to have a very pathological home environment. Oh, thank you so much for the gift, guys. Oh, I love that. Join my team. I have not seen that before. I appreciate that. So they tend to come from a home life that is just very abusive, violent, unpredictable, chaotic, frightening, and maybe very shaming, very dangerous. And so they have, I think, this is my theory, this is not necessarily biblical, but my theory is that they have learned that power equates safety, and in the ability power is safety. I think for them, they realize that the way to manage this environment is to not be vulnerable, that exposing yourself and being known by other people and having emotions, being a human in a dangerous home is very, very dangerous. And so they learn not to be. And they also at the same time don't have good modeling. So they don't learn how to handle their emotions, and they don't learn how to deal with disappointment and failure and vulnerability and shame. They don't learn how to deal with any of that. And so, and they learn by modeling and by maybe even by their genetics that if they intimidate and exploit and lie, that things tend to go better for them. So that's what they do. They're very drive driven, meaning whatever they feel, whatever they want, whatever their need is in the moment, that's what they're going to do. Like think of like the crime lord people. I'm thinking like if you watch a Breaking Bad, sort of scary people that were they had very fast moods, like they'd flip from happy to raging or calm to scary violent. You're seeing a sociopath. That's a sociopathic behavior. They're the most dangerous actually, because they can go from 0 to 100 in a split second. You don't really know when they're going to move into this very dangerous state and they're at risk. A psychopath is somebody who generally is more of a born issue. These people tend to be odd from birth, and they tend to have very little emotional expression. They don't express a lot of emotions or show a lot of emotions. They tend to be kind of robotic and mechanical. They don't really get relationships, and they don't tend to relate well. They tend to struggle with intimacies. Again, they think they're superior and that they're entitled and all of that, but they tend to be very flat and odd. And they don't have any compassion or empathy for you, but neither does a sociopath. So the biggest difference is they're the same in no empathy. They tend to think they're superior. They tend to think they're entitled, but the biggest difference is how they handle their emotions. I think psychopaths, my opinion of psychopaths is they tend to be more stilted, stunted, like robotic, and sociopaths tend to be very, very mercurial, their moods are volatile, very, very volatile. So that to me is the biggest difference between the two of them. Can they change? No, generally not. The sociopath, why would they want to change? And the psychopath is if it's a genetic problem, that becomes something very, very hard to change. Now, can narcissists change? That becomes the next question. If they do a lot of work, and if they see themselves as a problem and they start to develop insight, which the problem is they don't generally have good insight into themselves, and they don't tend to be self-reflective. So you can't change if you can't measure something. Like imagine, for example, cutting a board that's 7 feet long. If you have no measuring tape to know that it's 7 feet long, how are you going to know if you hit that mark? So self-reflection is a great way for us to know that we are different, that we're behaving differently. And if you can't take a look at yourself and your behavior, then how do you ever know what you're doing and how it's impacting anybody else? Now, most of us don't like to do that anyway. That's hard for all of us, but it's really hard when you have a personality disorder. By the way, just to put a plug in, I don't know if you guys listen to Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse podcast, But one of the future episodes I'm going to be I'm having Kanika Bantra on. So Kanika, or I'm not for sure I'm saying her name right. I'm going to ask her Kanika or Kanika. I want to say Kanika because I'm pronouncing it phonetically. She's from Australia. For those of you who don't know who she is Miss World, Miss Universe finalist of 2022. And she's on TikTok. You can find her on YouTube. I'm sure you can find her on Facebook. She's got a very large platform, but she is a diagnosed sociopath. So I'll be interviewing her. Actually, I'm interviewing her Thursday morning. So I'll be interviewing her for a future episode, but I will be meeting with her early Thursday morning because she's 15 hours ahead of me. So I'm going to have to get up that morning to see her. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting. So if you have any questions you'd love me to ask her, let me know. I mean, I'd love to hear what you'd like to know about a sociopath. I sent her some questions, some things that, yeah, have you seen her, Floor? I've sent her some questions that I know that I want to ask. I'm trying to think of, I'll pull up the questionnaire I sent her. I'd like to know what people get wrong about sociopaths. That's one of my questions, is that what do people get wrong? I know where I put it. I put it in my Instagram. So let's see if I can get over there. So I'm excited. I was shocked, actually, she responded. Didn't think that she would, to be honest with you. Because she's got, I think on like Instagram, she's got 250,000 followers. Like, jeez, that's a lot of people. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I asked her, how and when were you diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder? Did you know there's something different about you? Describe how relationships work for you. Personality disorders are typically described as people who see other people as objects. Do you agree? Is this something you recognize that you're doing? What's something people get wrong about antisocial personality disorder or any of the cluster B personalities? And if someone gets into a relationship with somebody who's a sociopath, what would you advise them to do? And do you think people with an antagonistic personality style know that their behaviors are cruel or harmful? So this interview is going to be taking place this Thursday morning, but I will be posting it. I'll be posting it in June, so it won't be for a while, but it'll be in June. So if you guys have any questions that you would love me to ask her, I'd be happy to do that. Oh, what podcast is dope? Are you liking mine? Because I think she's got a podcast too. So Pastor John MacArthur says people shouldn't go to psychologists because psychology is based on evolution. If a psychologist tells me the sun is hot, then I don't say that's wrong. Huh. I don't agree with that. I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily based in truth, but that doesn't mean everything that they discover is wrong. So we have the ability to discern truth from falsehood. So yeah, do sociopaths feel guilty? If they do, it's only for a moment and then they justify it and it just disappears for them. But that's a great question to ask her. I would love to ask her, does sociopaths feel guilty, and what do you do when you feel guilty? Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. What's a defining moment of her child or adult that impacted her life? Oh, that's a good question too. I love that. Thank you. No, it won't be live, Bronco Barbie Shay. And I've been trying to, you're the one that lives in Austin, aren't you? Are they impulsive? That's another great question. Let me write some of these questions down. So okay. So do you feel guilty? Do you feel guilty? And do you see yourself as impulsive? That's another really good one. Yeah, I thought of you. You said that we should get together and do something. I thought that'd be fun. Yeah, what are her friendships like? I believe she's married or she's in a relationship. I also would like to know what her friendships are like with women, and is it different between men and women? She's gorgeous, by the way. She's Miss World, Miss Universe, so she's a very gorgeous looking woman. So that could also cause issues with her, with women, because she's so beautiful. So yeah, do all narcissistic relationships usually end quickly? I don't don't know if they all end quickly. I think it depends on the narcissist and the type of narcissist they are. I've known narcissists who stay in relationships their whole life. They never leave that relationship. I think their feelings for that person comes and goes. I think sometimes they love them and other times they don't like them at all. I think that, by the way, that's normal for all of us. We don't perfectly like or love our partner that we're with. Sometimes we can't stand them. But I do think that that swing is broader. It's a bigger swing for narcissists than it is for the rest of us. Are sociopaths popular? Oh, that's a great question. I would think so because they're charismatic. They tend to be very charismatic. So she actually has a flat affect. If you watch her stuff, you'll know what I mean. Her face is, you could say maybe it's too much Botox, but I have a feeling she's always like that. I don't think it's because she's had work done on her face. And I'm not saying she has. I don't know if she has or has not. I have no idea. But I think she just doesn't show a lot of emotions on her face. So, can narcissists marry other narcissists? Yeah, actually they can. Absolutely. Her name is Kanika. Kanika. Bantra. Batra. It's the same. Her name is the same on TikTok. Yeah, I think it's Kanita Bantra is her name. So I'm really looking forward to interviewing her. Like I said, I'm pretty shocked because her platform is very, very large. Another one that I'm going to be interviewing, and her interview is next week. Do you guys know Jessica Kent? In fact, she came into the live last week. So Jessica Kent is not a sociopath but Jessica was imprisoned on drug crimes. So I think she was in prison for 5 years maybe, or for a period of time. So she does a lot of TikTok prison stuff, what it's like to be in prison. But I want to ask her about toxic relationships in and out of prison, what it was like, what she's learned through her life experiences about danger and being around dangerous people. So I'm going to find that super fascinating to talk with her. And hers is that's next week, but I'll be posting it in May or the end of April. And then Kanika's will be posted like early June. That's when I plan to post hers. So will a trauma bond ever break, Violet? Absolutely. Don't feel weak because you keep going back. Don't feel bad about that. It's a common problem. The average number of times a person has to leave a toxic relationship is 7. I don't know if you knew that. It's 7 times. And it's because, here's how, if you think about it, we all have an innate need to be loved. Very, very much so. We're wired for that, belonging, to be in a relationship where we feel seen and valued. And toxic people are very good at giving that initial hit of that. They're very good at showing up in a way that makes you feel like you are because they idealize. There's something that happens inside of them too. Some of them believe it. They believe that they meet you, that you're going to solve all their problems. Everything that's ever gone wrong in their life, they're going to solve that problem. The TikTok name of the person I'm interviewing Thursday morning, but won't be aired till June, is Kanika, Kanika. Kate, if you're still here, could you put that name up for people so they can find her? Kanika Bantra, Batra, Batra, Kanika Bantra. So yeah, it's a very intoxicating experience to be in a relationship with a narcissist. They give you everything that you think that you've ever wanted, and thank you. That's exactly it, Kate. I appreciate it. They give you everything you ever think you've wanted or needed in your relationship, in life, in yourself. They make you feel like you found your soulmate, like you found that powerful connection. The problem is that they actually don't. That they can't sustain intimacy. They don't want you to know them. They are in a way they're addicted to love. They're just as desperate for that connection as you are. Even they're more so. They're very more so than they are. They do feel that intense connection with you, the same as you do. Now the problem is that the minute they get to know you and they feel that you're normal and that you're not this perfect person, they kind of create this caricature, like this. You become a fantasy Violet. You've become a fantasy Violet. They see you as this a superhuman person who's going to like to put you on a pedestal. That's how to view it. They really they adore you, they worship you, they think you're going to fix them, fix what's wrong. There's going to be this magical experience. Well, that's not real. I mean, that's not how we live. That's not what life looks like. We're ordinary, and you have needs, and you get sick, and you put pants on the same way that they do, and you're not always in the perfect space all the time. And as a result, something happens, and this is, if you follow mental healness, Lee Hammock, he talks about this. Something happens where you show up in some way that's doesn't match this, and it could be an ordinary, no big deal thing. It could be you didn't do anything wrong, but you somehow show that you're like, say that you burp at a table or something. Could be something tiny, something you don't even register as significant, and suddenly in their minds, poof, that dream they had of you, that fantasy is blown apart, and then now all of a sudden now they got the major ick with you. But by then they've rushed the relationship, and often you've done something that puts you guys together, like maybe you've moved across town, or moved across the country, not cross town, but moved across the country. Maybe you've bought a house, maybe you're pregnant, maybe you got married or something, and now they realize, oh, you're ordinary. You're not going to fix whatever they dream that you're going to fix. And so then they suddenly start to despise you, and they feel contempt for you, and they find you disgusting, and they can't stand you. And then that's when you start to experience the criticism and the gaslighting and the running you down and making you feel really bad. But when you start to get ready to leave, they don't want to be left. They don't want to leave on your terms. They want to leave on their terms. They're very afraid of abandonment. So they sense you kind of like checking out and distancing and detaching. And so then they pull you back in. They give you something they somehow promised you that that you need or you want, or that would keep you stuck, because they know that you're very attached to whatever it is. And then poof, there you go again. You think, oh, they've changed. They had this big revelation, or, maybe things are going to be better. And so then you end up, believing that, and you go in and you try again, thinking this is a real effort. They're really trying, and I'm really trying. You don't realize that this was all a fantasy in their head, and you step back in, and sure enough, now that you step in, they do this weird thing that I didn't understand. I didn't understand this until I think Lee Hammock's the one that really helped me get it home, is that in their mind, when you go back, it's like you then put a stamp of approval on everything they've ever done wrong. So if you now know they've cheated and you come back, then that means you're okay with cheating. Or if you knew that they'd been lying, or maybe they lost their job, or they're not working, or that they treat you cruel and horrible, whatever it is that they did before that they thought you should be like, they would never put up with. But now that you're coming back and you know this about them, they think now like you're saying, oh, I accept this. This is a part of who I let them be that. And so now they feel like they have more permission than ever. And here's another thing something I've realized is not only that, but they also think less of you. They want you back, but they despise you for coming back. Because in their mind's eye, they would never make that kind of compromise with you. If you harmed them that way, oh man, would they get you for that? They would so get you. And the fact that you can't hold that ground like they would hold that ground, now they know you're less than them. Now they know you're not them. Now they know you're not superior. And now they really have reasons to despise you, to think poorly of you, because in your mind, you've degraded yourself by coming back to them. That's something we don't talk about, that I really believe strongly, is that they see our willingness. For me, a person who's willing to work on a relationship, I hold them in esteem. That's a really cool person who's willing to take a look at themselves and take a look at what happened between us and work it out between us. That's what healthy, normal relationships look like. But that's not how they view it. They don't view it that way. They view it like, well, you put up with this crap before. I would never do that. So you're a weakling. There's something wrong with you. I would never go back to you. So they like you less for coming back. And I didn't understand that. I thought that made me more and made me better and made me a really strong, resilient, patient, loving person. I didn't know that it made me look weak and that my ex despised me more for not coming back. So I think understanding that can help you maybe view this a little different. And by the way, I love that you asked this question, Violet. I don't see you as weak. I see you as a cooperative, strong, compassionate person who believes in the importance of a relationship. To me, those are all beautiful qualities, but that's not how a narcissist view it. They really don't. They view it as weak. Um, and it is true. I agree with you, Marigold. Marigold says, but isn't that they're actually the weak one? Yes, absolutely. That's a very broken view of the world. And imagine that you come into the world saying, I can't trust anybody. Everything's a competition, and I have to be right all the time, and I'm never going to expose myself, and I'm certainly not going to look at what I do and take any responsibility for that. I don't see that as a healthy person. I see that as a pretty pathetic individual. Yeah, RWD. Yeah, I haven't really been talking much about religion because we talked about it the first part of for the first 20 minutes, and it didn't go over very well. It was not a lot. People here, my audience is not very religious, and so that topic is not a big topic here. But I do agree with you. I've seen your comments, and I do agree with you about that. I do think pastors should be preaching about narcissism. That we should look at. Abuse that happens in the church is wrong. We should not hide it. It should be something that we can look at openly. I do definitely agree with it. By the way, for those of you, and I haven't talked about it today, but I'm holding a retreat with Lisa Sunny and with Rosanna Fay called Roller Coaster of Love, and we're going to be having a retreat in Orlando, Florida, where we do equine therapy. So I'm super excited about that. That we're going to be where you can look at how you interact with the world, because I'm thinking of you, Violet, that after this, it makes you feel really insecure. That I know for me, I ended up wondering what's wrong with me. Like why did I not say no? Why was I so willing to if you read Love You More, you see how willing I am to put up with so much cruddy stuff. And you could tell that the person I was married to was there was a lot of covert narcissism. So a lot of manipulation was happening. So there's going to be a retreat in Florida called Strong and Unstoppable. You can find it at Wellness Recovery Retreats. If you go to Wellness Recovery Retreats, all in one word, smish it together, put .com. It's called Strong and Unstoppable. It's this October. We're going to be doing equine therapy. Have you guys heard of that? It's where you work with a horse. Now, no, you're not riding a horse. You'll be like taking the horse for a walk and maybe doing a little grooming, like doing some brushing. And while you do it, they have therapists who actually watch you, and they notice how you interact, because a horse, as a prey animal, so in other words, horses are hunted by predators. They have learned to mirror the person they're with, and they're also a pack animal, and they view you as dominant. So they will mirror your behavior and reflect how you interact with the world around you. And then they'll mirror that behavior back to you. So they act like a really great reflection of the ways in which you're handling yourself, handling relationships, because you've been through this experience with a toxic person. So if you'd like to get it, the purpose of the 4-day retreat is to regain confidence in yourself so that you can regain confidence in the world. And I'd love to see you guys there. The pricing is on the internet, so it's wellnessrecoveryretreats.com. So if you're interested in it, take a survey to see if you qualify. We have a stipulation. You can't be currently trying to work to save the relationship with a narcissist. So if you're in a relationship and your headspace is still like, oh, I want to stay and I want us to get to better and I think this will, then you're not really, that's not the best, you're not in the best spot for this retreat. So you need to, oh, I did see your, Holly, I would love to have you come. I did see your survey come through. So that would be great. No, and Bronco Barbie Shay, why don't you text me? Let's text me, and I'd love to, I hear you say you can't trust anybody. I'd love to meet you and we can talk about that, or just get to know you better. Since we're in the same city, that would be nice. I sometimes wonder if I should host a meetup in Austin and see how many people would come. I don't know if anybody would come or not, but yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, it's really the equine therapy is, oh, you're in UK. UK is on my list to visit. I really want to visit UK. I'm have a lot of heritage that's English and Scotch Irish. So I would love to make it there. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, I would love to meet you too. That would be fun to talk to you. So you're in a meetup would be cool, but you're in New Hampshire. I would love to meet you too, Kate. So your daughter lives near Austin, Marigold, is that what you're saying? Yeah, if I do visit UK, I'll make sure to let you know that I'm in the area. I'm going to be going to Austria and Switzerland. I don't know who lives in, I don't know of anybody who lives in Austria or Switzerland. Usually, because this is, speaks English, that I get people who speak English, and that means it's either Australia or UK or Canada. I mean, those tend to be the countries that I see the most, but yeah. Yeah, our WD said he had religious narcissistic parents and they used religion to guilt you. That's a common problem, is to weaponize religion. It's a huge problem. It is so hard to trust. Now, here's the thing that I find here. I want to throw this out there for everybody talking about trust right now. Trust gets really tricky because many of us, before we were a victim, blindly trusted people. We thought that everybody's worthy of trust until they prove that they're not. So we just gave trust away. So we waited until someone would show up and say, oh, they behave in a way that's not trusting. Now I can't trust them. And then they stop trusting. But that's not how we should approach trust. Trust should be earned. We should walk into a relationship saying, I'm not for sure if this person is trustworthy. I'm going to start to pay attention to how they treat others, how they treat their family, what they do when nobody's watching, how they treat me. And then if that continues to be really good, then I'm going to then realize that this person's worthy of my trust. Then I can trust them. But I even think trust should grow. I think trust should start small and then over time grow and get bigger and bigger based on consistency. View it like dancing, where you watch this person and you mirror their movements, and as you find safety with them, you share more of yourself. It's a growing situation. Increase safety, then you increase the trust. But I don't think we should just walk out and trust people. And I think that when victims, after they survive a really toxic relationship and they are struggling with trusting, one of the things that feels wrong is they're realizing now people have to earn trust, so they don't naturally trust, and they feel like, well, now something's wrong with me because I just don't trust people. No, actually, I think you're being wise. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think you're learning to trust in a different way. So just something to think about, to really ask yourself. I have not heard of Sven from... but I have seen that guy. Yes, I don't watch a lot of his stuff, but I do know that who he is. So there's a lot of you guys from the UK. So if I was to go to UK, which I have a huge desire to go, where should I go? I mean, should I go to England or should I go to Wales or Scotland? I definitely want to visit Scotland because I don't know if you guys know, my maiden name is Kerr, Kerr. So I'm Scotch Irish. And then my married name is McAvoy, which is Irish. They're actually Northern Ireland, from Northern Ireland. I know that for sure. They've traced themselves all the way back. So is Kerrs. Kerrs are from Northern Ireland too. Oh, take you with you? That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, I know that I know Manjeet, and Manjeet says, hey, if I ever show up in UK, definitely stop and see her. I would want to go with somebody, and my sons say they don't want to go to the UK. I don't know why. We're going to go to Austria and Switzerland this fall. And then next year, I think we're planning to go to Spain next year, which, so do Scotland and southern England. You're in Devon. Ah, all right, all right. Yeah, so my thought is traveling alone and just showing up there. Yeah, it'd be kind of a little scary. It'd be better to do with somebody, just not do on my own. But I do have a huge, here's another reason why I want to go. This is a really weird, yeah, Spain. I mean, I've been to Spain before, but a weird reason I want to go to England is because I think I see more colors than normal. I think I'm not a trichromic. I think I'm the quad. I have I think I have 4 cones to see colors. I think I'm one of these people who see 16 million colors. I've taken the color tests and I pass them all the time. I see all hues of colors, these amazing hues of colors. And so I'd like to find out if that actually is true. And there is a running research right now looking at that. And I think it would be fun to find out whether or not, and I don't know, I don't know what the name of it is. I'm going to kill it if I try to say it. But my mom can attest that I'm very, very good at picking out, like, matching hues in an even I can remember them too. So I see all these like shades of everything, a lot of shades of stuff. So it's one of those things. I know a family, boys, who can't see any color at all. Everything's gray. No, it's not synesthesia. Synesthesia is when you mix your senses. So when you see a color, you hear a sound, or you or you feel something, or you smell something. It's when the senses are crossing. And so you have a mixed sensory experience. No, mine is that I see lots of colors, just loads and loads and loads of colors. Which for me is a way of always, that's the way life has always looked to me. So I don't know anything different. So it's not like I'm like, oh, the world's colorful. It's just always been colorful to me. So I would like to know if I actually see the world differently than anybody else. That would be fun to learn. But, oh, so this guy on Badass Counseling says he talks about trust and learning to trust yourself versus learning to trust your gut instinct. Yeah, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to learn to trust, because a lot of us, if you've grown up in a home that says don't have feelings and don't listen to yourself, then you're going to end up feeling like you can't trust it. But I think this is how I've grown my trust. I pay attention to what I feel, and then even if I ignore it, I later revisit it and check it. Was it right? And it's always right. And then I say to myself, why did I ignore it? So then I slow down and ask myself, why did I ignore these feelings? Well, and I try to be very honest with myself, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's all learning. And then when I hear like, wow, I really wanted this person to like me, or I didn't want to be a weirdo and say something, and I'm thinking, well, was it worth it? Did you like how that worked out when you didn't? And often like, no, I don't like that. So then I end up going back like, I should have said something. It would have gone better, a whole lot better. So that's a way we can kind of learn from our own experience, is to pay attention to this, be observant. That can really help you gain some insight into these. Well, this is really awesome. Next week, I'm thinking about, next week's podcast is on pet abuse. And I want to talk about not just pet abuse, but why narcissistic people and toxic people are cruel to the very vulnerable, to anybody who's disenfranchised, maybe to children, to stepchildren, to pets. Anything that's kind of like, I really want to talk about this whole gamut of how toxic people are cruel to people who have less power. So that's going to be next week's topic, and it's going to be 4 o'clock on Tuesday. And if you are a woman and you really like to regain confidence in your world, confidence in yourself, really consider coming to the Strong and Unstoppable in Orlando, Florida. It's going to be in October 3rd through the 6th. I'm super excited about it. It's going to be amazing. And I would love to see you there and get to meet you guys. Yeah, and Barnacle Barbie, you're going to DM me, right? That's what you said. You're going to DM me. Yep, pet neglect. We're going to talk about pet neglect and pet abuse next week. Oh, I know, it's so awful. Yeah, so we can get into that. Why do they do that? How does animals get weaponized against us? And anybody around that, anybody with less power gets weaponized against us. We're going to talk about that. 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. Yes, 4 o'clock. So for you, it'd be 5 o'clock. I always come on at 5 o'clock for you. All right, you guys. You should be getting an email, Holly. If you sent that survey in, and I know it's slow, but you should be getting it soon. If you don't, I watch those emails, so I'll pay attention. Let me know, Holly. You can DM me. My DMs are open everywhere. You can DM me and I'll let you know, okay? If you don't see it, and I'll forward you the application. All right, you guys, I'll see you next Tuesday. I so love hanging out with you guys. Great questions today. Thank you for your help with this upcoming Thursday interview with Kanika. I'll let you know how that goes next week. I'll give you an update on it. What happens. All right, you guys. I'm glad. Really wonderful hanging out with you too. All right, bye-bye, you guys.